Now, some of you Ambedkar, some of you don't. So let me give you a little orientation to his wonderful personal story. He's really a remarkable individual in the Indian context. Many in India know of him, and they may know of him as a political figure, or as an activist figure, or a civil rights figure. But what you will see today is that he is very much a theorist as well as person of action. He was born in Mahar, which is a quote unquote untouchable caste in India in 1891. Now untouchables are largely called by the self-chosen label Dalit. That's how I'll tend to refer to him, at Marathi for crushed. And through his hard work, his initiative, and some luck, he got a scholarship by a princely figure in Baroda, and he was enrolled in Elphinstone College in Mumbai, and then eventually enrolled in Columbia University in 1913. Now, this was epochal for India and democracy in South Asia. Why? Because everyone else, from Gandhi to Nehru, all the other folks, and few if any of them were Dalit, went to the UK. They went to Oxford, Cambridge. They went to Lincoln's Inn in London to learn law. They went into the channels of empire for education. So, for whatever reason, and I have my theories, Ambedkar went to Columbia University, and there he ended up in the classrooms of some of the most progressive academics of his day, people that were pushing the envelope in terms of tax policy, economics, sociology, and as we'll talk about today, he ended up in John Dewey's class. So when he comes back to India later on after finishing up degrees in Columbia and also in the UK. He got a law degree and a degree from the London School of Economics. He comes back to India and he leads social protests, first under the banner of Gandhi and the Satyagraha movement that Gandhi was leading. Eventually, he breaks with Gandhi because he felt that Gandhi and the figures circulating around Gandhi were not taking caste oppression that seriously. So, by 1935, he famously announces he was born a Hindu, yet he will not die a Hindu. In the 1940s, as many people know, he was drawn in by the Nehru government, the first government of the independent India, to become one of the chief architects of India's constitution. So that's a lot of people remember him for that role. In the 1950s, he leaves for the large part politics and turns to a massive campaign of trying to convince his fellow Dalits that the way out of caste oppression is to leave the fold of Hinduism altogether. And he reinvents a form of Buddhism to do this. So it's a wonderful life, and it's one that involves him writing books and giving many, many speeches. And unlike John Dewey, Ambedkar knew how to give a good speech. He would draw crowds of tens of thousands. And you see on my timeline, in 1950, when he converted finally to Buddhism, right before he died, in the audience, 500,000 of his followers converted after him. So in some ways, he was an oratorical rock star. So let's talk about the Dewey Connection, though. And this is something that always bugged me. Everyone that writes on this important figure for Indian democracy and Indian civil rights and the anti-caste movement, everyone that writes on Bhimrao Ambedkar, in other words, they always mention the importance of his education, and they always mention the importance of Professor Dewey, his beloved John Dewey. And, they always point to this letter to his second wife. Ambedkar penned it in New York, right across the street from Columbia, when he went back there in 1952 to get an honorary doctorate. And Dewey had just died. Actually, he died June 1st. Ambedkar gets the date wrong in his letter, but it no matter. And he says, "I owe all my intellectual life to Dewey." So everyone knows this. Everyone mentions this, but no one goes deeper. No one knows any details about how Dewey mattered to this project. So that kind of, gave me some impetus. And I've gone to India about 5 or 6 times under the auspices of this project. I've tried to meet everyone that's a lay collector of Ambedkar's photographs, that are scholars of Ambedkar's work, that are politicians or educational leaders, some of them Ambedkar's family, but all of them trying to carry on Ambedkar's legacy. So I've tried to meet everyone I can that can give me insight into Ambedkar's mind and the development and the impact and the content of his education. And I've tried to find every scrap of paper. I've looked at every book that is formerly from his library and every annotation that he has left in these books. And, this has given me a rich view, I think, of the thinker, Bhimrao Ambedkar. So, for instance, there are things that are there if you just look for them. So one in a 100-year-old book that I found at Siddharth College. It's you know how old it is and when he got it because he signed this one. And October 1914, this is right when he starts taking Dewey's classes. In the back of this book, jammed in there is a 100-year-old piece of scrap paper. And you can tell it's scrap paper because he blots one of his beloved ink pens on it. And what's he doing in this paper? You see him, kind of writing down some word every philosophy student gets perplexed by, manifold, probably when it comes to something on Kant. But he's also signing his name, he's practicing his signature, and he's also doodling John Dewey's name. So Ambedkar is someone we get so fixated on as a thinker, someone who was a man of action, a man of theory, but he was also someone who's creative. He was always also someone who dreamed. He was also someone who doodled. And what was he doodling in 1914? John Dewey's name. Another clue I came across in Carbondale, Illinois, at the Center for Dewey Studies, was a recollection by Nima Adlerbloom. No one has noticed this recollection before. I mean, it's useful because it fleshes out her, decades worth of time as a student in Dewey's class, and she continued on working with Dewey and his wife after 1926 as well. So Adlerbloom, is this fascinating figure for Dewey studies, but no one's really connected her to Ambedkar, and I was interested in this because she was talking about students. She talks a little bit about the East Asian students from China and Japan that Dewey attracted many of, and then I came across a paragraph that made my heart stop. She starts talking about an Indian student, one Indian student. She never names this student. So she says, there was once a student from India whom I saw daily. He was always with pen and paper, and he was reading Dewey's articles. And he recopied the class notes after each lecture. And when he would read these lectures, it sounded as if Dewey himself were talking, not a single word omitted. He showed me his attached comments searching for a bridge between Dewey and Buddhism. Both, he said, aim at the highest morality. But Dewey's drive for a good society might be more conducive to happiness than nirvana. In the United States, he met Dewey, who gave a new turn to his life. In infusing Dewey's concept of an idealistic democracy, he may be of some help in easing the ugly, ingrained tradition of the untouchables. Now, as I argue in my recent book, this has to be Ambedkar. If it's not, there's still a story of pragmatism in India, but we've got more to write. But this has to be in Ambedkar because of so many of those details that line up with other things we know about his personality, his manner of imitating Dewey, and his interest in the untouchables, not just in Indian independence. So this is epochal for me because this shows from his early days, he was interested not just in Buddhism, but was interested in merging it with a certain orientation he saw in Dewey's thought. So the full version of my vision of what he does to Dewey's pragmatism and to the Buddhism that he saw in India has recently come out in a University of Chicago Press book. That's the one that has rhetoric in the subtitle, and it's come out in an Indian trade edition through HarperCollins India and South Asia, and that's the one with the yellow font title. So both of these will give you the same story. They're the same book, but I wanted to make this story accessible because it has something to say to us here in the West, interested in pragmatism and rhetoric, and it has something to say to folks in India who are intensely interested in Ambedkar and how to create a more ideal democracy.